We are back on Morning Line. We're going to get to some phone calls here in a moment. Real quickly, a couple topics that I mentioned going to the break. First, with regard to medical marijuana. It passed actually in the House with a swing vote from Speaker of the House, Beth Harwell, voting to move it forward out of committee into full committee to talk about this bill legalizing it in the state. Medical marijuana, not recreational. Now, among others testifying against it, the Sheriff's Association, and my friend and a man I have a lot of respect for, Sheriff Terry Ash, used to be in Wilson County. Now he heads up the Sheriff's Association. Your take on this, do you have a handle on why the Sheriff's Association objects to the legalization of medical marijuana?
You know, I've heard the arguments. I've been in the room with, by the way, I respect the Sheriff's Association, Sheriff Ash, and all the folks who are involved. So, I mean, again, I'm representing Nashville, so when I'm speaking about it, I surely don't want to discourage their involvement and the way that they feel about it. But a lot of the arguments I hear from them is that it's just the start, and then if you do medical, you'll do the next, and you'll do the next, it'll be legal. If you be legal, then we'll have all these problems and so forth. So it's in some ways.
Do you buy those arguments?
No.
Okay.
I
don't either.
It doesn't mean that I, you know, I understand the, you know, look, if the world was pure, we wouldn't have alcohol in every street corner, and you can buy more liquor today. You and I can drive right now than 30 minutes and buy all we want that is proven to influence us and impact, intoxicate us in ways that we can't function. Yeah. Legally, you can do that. You know, if we were pure as a world, as a society, then that would be different. I mean, but the truth is, it's really about moderation. It is. It's about drinking. It's about, you know, which is a drug and severely impacts the way we live today in our world. You know, pharmaceuticals. If you want to impress me, fix the opioid problem. Yeah.
Which, by the way, is legal.
Right. I don't understand.
Okay, so I was just wondering, and Sheriff's, I did talk to Sheriff Ash later, and the impression I got from him is that most sheriffs that he knows of, like yourself, I think, don't object to the idea of medical marijuana being made available by prescription to patients that can benefit from it, okay? That was his sense, but he says the objection from his perspective is that it still remains illegal at the federal level, and they find the sheriffs, who are law enforcement officers, caught between a rock and a hard place, and that they still have to abide by, more or less, the federal law, not what a state does. And so there's some confusion there, and he wishes the FDA would get involved, maybe approve medical marijuana legally at the federal level, which would clear the path for the Sheriff's Association to back off. I don't know.
And I've heard this at length, and I think he's right about that. In an ideal world, the federal government would wise up to the reality of where we are today in our country and what's going on in our country. To me, the federal law should be adjusted to meet what everybody's trying to do in other states, because it would simplify it for law enforcement, for the consumer, for the situation out there. It is very confusing. I just don't believe that's reason enough in states like Tennessee, for the Sheriff's Association to mount a fight against it. I think it's worthy of trying to move the federal government. I think that's one thing we could all do. If every state would move in a direction like this, I think the federal government's going to be forced to do it. Okay. But I think it's legitimate. Their concerns are real, but I look at it two ways. You know, I think it's going to happen anyway. I was in college 30 years ago, and in grad school, and my advisor back then in criminology was my advisor was in a criminology division, and he said something. This is 30 years ago. I didn't believe him, and he said that marijuana will be legal in this country when one of two things happen: when the alcohol industry collapses or the tobacco industry.
And tobacco is
30 years
taking
ago.
a hit. Yeah.
And back then, tobacco was on top of the world, and so was. And he said the only reason it isn't legal then was because the lobby of those two organizations would never let it happen. And what you see happening now is that we've kind of looked back as a country and said, well, wait a minute, you know, there are more people in the country today living in places where it is legal, medical, and in some cases recreational. More people live than not. So the majority of people in this country are living in a place right now where either recreational or medical is legal. California, New York, all these. So the point is, the majority of people are living there in that setting. Over the next few years, I think the rest of us will end up there. And part of it, good or bad, is marijuana probably isn't good for you. I'm not a fan of any of it. As a person, the reality is, neither is alcohol. Okay, but if you want to give me something to fix, look, my son had had a back surgery about a month ago. He's 23 years old. This is a true story. 23 years old. Pretty significant surgery in his back. Take him home. He's had 3 or 4 of these surgeries. Take him home. go to get the medicine the doctor prescribed. It's a true story, Nashville, Tennessee, 1 month ago, and he was prescribed 80 Percocet.
80? What's he need 80 Percocet for? Wow.
And you're worrying about medical marijuana?
Yeah.
And it's not a good thing, but our society is out of whack if we're fighting over issues like medical marijuana when you've got the medical industry overprescribing and this country overusing something that's far more dangerous and will kill you.
And many of the experts say that at least the CBD oil could be something that's a substitute for opioids. And boy, if you have an option between the two and they both would do the equal effect on you, you'd be nuts not to use the oil, because we know what opioids are doing, and it can be very difficult. Let's take a few phone calls before we have to go to another break. Joe, good morning. Hey, Joe.
Good morning, Nick and the Sheriff.
Good morning, Joe.
I'll hit on the shootings first. When this kind of deal goes down, the Sheriff probably will say the same thing, I think. There's a whole lot of confusion with everything. Nobody knows if they're inside, outside. You don't know, what the officer knew at the time. I think the first responding officers, the first few of them got there, they didn't even know for sure.
They thought it was firecrackers, according to this deputy that's taking a real beating, and he also was under the impression that the shooter may have been still outside instead of inside. And so that's why he was looking outside, because there was a report of someone being shot at a football field nearby. So whether that's still, others have said, look, you could hear round after round after round being shot inside the school. He had to know they were inside. I don't know. But go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
I could say it's a confusing situation.
Yep, chaos.
Yeah, no, you're right. Wait, let me ask you this, Sheriff, and he brings up the great point on that. It was another question that several people have asked on Facebook right now. The confusing situation that Joe brings up, coupling with the suggestion now of maybe arming teachers. Your thoughts?
I just don't believe in that at all. And I say that as a practice. I find it hard to believe that we would ever require teachers. Teaching's hard enough. I mean, I can't imagine. If you want to do something in that regard, and I'm just saying if you're one of those people, let's get a trained law enforcement officer, add 2 more in the hallways or 3 more in the I don't know, if that's where you want to go. I just don't see, let them teach. Now, as a person, as an individual, if they want to go home on the weekends and shoot and practice and do all that, that's fine. But as an additional part of your job, or putting in the teacher having to balance all of that stuff out, and quite frankly, if it's my children and they're in the classroom and all of a sudden something's going down the hallway, I don't want that teacher leaving my kids run down there to stop the threat at the other end of the hallway. My kids have no idea. They need someone to lead them through. So what is that? Unless you barge in the room, and I can't imagine a teacher being an effective tool at that point. We're in big trouble that kids are in the classroom and teachers are shooting up. I mean,
I worry law enforcement too, responding to the scene, seeing a teacher in plain clothes, maybe mistaking that teacher for the shooter. And I mean, you heard the president suggest it, and I'm open for suggestions you can talk about. And there's some folks that rationally think, well, yeah, if a teacher had a gun, but really when you get to the nitty gritty and you think about it, I'm all for making kids safer. I have not been convinced, because of some of the things you just said, that arming teachers, even if they're willing to, and I know there would be some teachers willing to. My question for you, though, too, is the level of training. They're saying, well, first of all, you're going to pay for it all, really? And what kind of guns? Where are they going to store the guns? They're going to be packing it on their body. And then what kind of training? I want to make darn sure. Hey, we just saw an SRO in Florida who had a ton of training, afraid or whatever, going into the school. What kind of training are these teachers going to get? Could they get training on par with what law enforcement gets?
Yeah, and I mean, my law enforcement friends would agree with this. I mean, if you and I are both trained law enforcement officer, and I think if you're 20 feet away from me and I'm trying to shoot you, believe it or not, it's not like the movies, it's not like the TV show. That's not easy to learn how to do, and even once you're trained to do it, to accomplish what you're trying to do. I mean, it's not like the TV or the movies. And so to imagine that a teacher who is responsible for the safety of the kids, that doesn't mean necessarily, in my mind, arming them to do that. I want them to give direction to my child. Where do I need to be? You get under your desk, maybe try to secure the door and so forth. I don't want them running down the hallway with a gun trying to stop the guy and then leaving those kids alone. And again, you're going to laugh at me, because if you'd have told me we'd ever have this conversation 20 years ago, I'd have laughed at you.
Yeah.
Someday, someone is going to say, let's arm the kids.
I know, that's the thing. I think I've heard from a few people suggesting arming the kids on my Facebook page, Nick Barris, NC5. And if you're one of those, just unfriend me. We're going to take a break. I mean, it's coming. Arming the kids.
It's coming. And
yeah, if you're for that, then just you're not part of the conversation. But as far as arming teachers, I know that's part of the discussion now, and I think it's fair to discuss. The president brought it up, but I see some details that need to be worked out before that could even be an option. Yeah. We need to take a break. When we come back, the number is 737-7587. We're streaming live right now on Facebook as well. If you want a message, offer an opinion or a question at newschannel5.com. Back with more right after this.